truth,
love,
and the good.
Here we go.
Welcome to the DTPHD Podcast. This is should be around episode 6. I'm not sure. I am doing something for the first time. I've never even attempted this before, and we are simultaneously on a podcast, on a Man Up episode, and filming a vlog. So for the guys out watching me on the video, I got AirPods on as our little Bluetooth microphones here because I also have a lapel mic for the video. So hello on YouTube, hello on iTunes, hello wherever we're hosting this, and let's get into it. There's a question here. Actually, this is a Man Up episode first because we're going to release this on Man Up first, and then it will come out as a podcast later. I'm getting distracted by looking at the sound waves there. And this is a post that I made that was, originally on Harry Connick Jr.'s show, and it was Kristen Bell's relating about her husband Dax Shepard's rules for arguments. And I thought it was a really nice thing to see. It's a very short clip of like 2 minutes. So you can see it in the Facebook group, the Man Up Facebook group where I posted it. We'll also post it in the DTPHD Podcast group, so you can refer to it. And I posted it as a great short example of what it's like to be a mature masculine man in a relationship from her perspective. And I just sort of shared it sort of like just a nice thing to look at. And by the way, we're also at a live event. This is the final day of the final weekend of the Total Transformation Program, which has been ongoing for 7 years, since 2010. So this is the final hour. Actually, we're coming up to the final hour of Total Transformation. Never thought that would happen, but it has. The longest running single program in dating skills that I know of. And it's a live program here in Singapore. So thank you guys for being here. All right, cool. Yeah, give yourselves a hand too. Yeah. All right, so we've got 3 mics here as well, so I hope there's not too much interference. And anyway, going back to the question, it is very pertinent to what we've been discussing this entire weekend, and we're exploring the nature of relationships here. And so I posted this as a really cool thing to look at, and I assumed that the guys would look at it and say, oh, that's really nice. But actually it got really polarized reactions, which is what caused me to know that, I know that out of that I need to make this episode. So if you haven't seen it, I'm just going to run it. I'm just going to summarize it for you very quickly. So Kristen Bell, the normal way that she dealt with arguments was she said that she would slam the door. When she gets really mad, she'd walk out of the house and she'd slam the door of their bedroom, wherever they're arguing, then slam the front door of the house, then get into the car and screech out of the driveway and go around the corner, screeching her tires, and then park around the corner and then stew. And I guess after that, she'd calm down and then eventually make it her way back in the house and whatever, get on with life. And that was her way of dealing with the conflict of basically running and getting space and so on. And the husband, Dax, told her that was not acceptable anymore, which is a good move because that's not going to be any way to grow in a relationship if you just keep running from conflict and not resolving it. And if you run right in the moment, if you leave this situation right in the moment in which you're most emotionally triggered, then you will never heal and you will never mature, and the problem will not really be resolved. There are sane, rational people who think it's better to take your time and cool down. But if you're going to do that, and it's fine to do that, but then you need to communicate that I'll be back in 5 minutes, or there's some bounded time, and this is the time that you need to sort of just check out and take care of yourself, and you'll be back at X time. So then the person knows to just wait around for that time. But if you just leave, what'll happen is normally it will trigger the reflex in the partner. It'll trigger the reaction in the partner because that will bring up the trauma of abandonment and so on. So anyway, so this is a good move. So Dax had the wherewithal and the self-awareness to say to her that this is not going to work in their relationship and that she can't leave the house now. And she's like, what? And a lot of guys who saw this clip saw this as a play between masculine and feminine energies. And I'm in another Facebook group for research purposes, and it's another man's group. And it was originally it was also posted there, and the discussion there was about what a masculine man who leads should be. So they're really focused on leading. And then the younger guys, because the younger guys are going to be generally more liberal, asked, well, why is it the man who has to lead? And then I actually got that same question in the Man Up group, and that's what prompted me to create this episode for him, for Yannick. And before I get to that, though, it's really important to point out that a lot of guys think this is a problem between a man and a masculine and feminine. That the masculine thing is to lay down the law, lay down the rules. This is the way it is. Like that in itself is supposedly sexy, and that can be sexy. There's no doubt that leading and being dominant is coming from a masculine figure is something that a feminine energy would find attractive. But that's not what's happening. That shouldn't be the lesson that you take from this, because if you just lay down rules as a way to turn on your wife, you could be laying down some really bad rules, right? For no reason, but just to turn her on. Like just laying down Nazi rules are really stupid, right? So let's be a little bit more mature and pay attention to the rules that were being laid down. And basically, he just told her how to have a better argument, how to have a better communication in a relationship, how to be a more mature human being. You don't run whenever you're just angry and then stew and then think, I've won the argument because you've stewed. And that's a valid point. So she learned to not run. So she'd make it out to the front door and then wait. And then after she was able to deal with not leaving the house, then he said, you can't even leave the bedroom. So then she dealt with that. And so instead of leaving the bedroom, she's like, okay. Because he said, if you do this, then I can't stay in this relationship. And so that was like that was a lot of guys cotton on to that and thinking that's what a man should do. He should lay down ultimatums and rules. That's the manly leadership. And that's not just in and of itself, the lesson, it shouldn't be that in and of itself, laying down rules and ultimatums is attractive or even positive in a relationship. Okay, so it's not. Hopefully, the lesson you take from this isn't a masculine-feminine lesson. It's instead a lesson about how to succeed in relationships and how to be mature. So then she can't leave the bedroom, and instead she deals with that, and to deal with the tension in her body and in her mind, because she can't release it by running and slamming things, she instead stews in the corner of the room and texts him nasty things. But this is obviously hopefully you can see how that is a progression. She's matured. That's a better way of dealing with it than running from it and not continuing the conversation and possibly triggering abandonment reaction in the man. And so that's the summary of that. And along the way, I gave a little commentary. But the point of this is that a lot of guys saw this as a masculine-feminine issue. And I'm here to say it's not, right? So the comment that I'd like to point out in the Man Up group comes from Yannick. And this is the one I'm responding to primarily. He says, I have a bittersweet reaction to this video, probably because it reminds me so much of my previous relationship and what I failed to impose. What I find very interesting is the imbalance of power in the relationship. So he's really looking at power, right? So the insecure masculine reaction is to think about power, domination, laying down rules, laying down the law, laying down ultimatums. That's like the man's way of dealing with things. Or that's their fantasy, to be like the dominant man. That's what they want to be. They think that's what a man should be. So he doesn't like this, Yannick. He doesn't like to be that way. Yannick seems to me like a kind of soft-hearted guy, and so I mean that like a tender-hearted guy. So that's a good thing. He's like he's a love bug or something like that. So he doesn't want to always have to be monitoring the power imbalances. And so he says she complies because he refused to accept her drama. Now that's not quite true. This is a misinterpretation or a misunderstanding of pickup artists. They think that drama happens because you're not strong enough. And if you were just to say drama happens because you're not strong enough, the reason why that might be true is because strong and drama have a lot of different meanings. And if you understand the right meanings for those, that sentence might be true. But the way that's normally interpreted is that in that you got to lay down the law kind of way. And when drama happens, you got to punish it. So I know people, guys who've learned game know that, or have learned that they should reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. And this is an example, they believe, of refusing to accept her drama and laying down the law. And he says so Yannick continues, she had to compromise because he wouldn't. She got trained and not the other way around, and she loved it. I've been raised, so this is actually a great summary of the manly man's, I'll call it Joe Blow. Joe Blow's sort of like jock, bimbo, bro science interpretation of this short 2-minute interview. And that's understandable, by the way. So I want it, Joe Blow, to be derogatory, but I don't want it to be too derogatory. I've been raised, he says, Yannick, to idealize women or at least treat them as equal partners. Well, idealize women, probably isn't a good thing. You shouldn't idealize anybody, but treating them as equal partners sounds like a good idea. I hope we're not back in the 1800s or earlier, right? So that sounds nice, equal partner. The way I would want to be treated, but it doesn't work that way. Now this bitterness comes out, and this is like sort of the red pill bitterness that they have to. They're losing the evolutionary game to the females. And they don't like that. They want the females to be subjugated and subservient, where they belong, they think. But Yannick's not like that. He's evincing some of the bitterness, and if you follow that route, he'd end up in that sort of red pill bitterness. But he's not going there. He says, I felt bad about dominating. He says, the way I would want to be treated is the way he wants to treat his partner, but it doesn't work that way. I felt bad about dominating, and still do, I have to admit, because it got such a bad rap, and I saw firsthand how it destroyed my parents' relationship, but I'm getting more subtle now. That being said, I still have difficulty about the nuances. So he's misinterpreted, well, I guess there's no interpretation of the video, but he took the wrong lesson from it, a bad lesson, which was that the way to be a man in a relationship is a dominating, not dominant, but dominating man who lays down laws, and they could be arbitrary rules. The thing to pay attention is that rule was not arbitrary, but he thinks that it's just about laying down the law, and he refused to compromise, so she had to. That's a horrible way to run a relationship. That will just basically run into, like, it's just the two of you. It's just going to create nuclear war in the relationship. No, this isn't a relationship. This is very unenlightened. And by the way, all the guys giving out this sort of advice, this sort of Joe Blow advice, have shit relationships or wives who are fine in a subservient relationship. And generally, those women who are looking to be subjugate themselves to the man are generally weak-willed women. And if you want that, well, you can still find that somewhere, but they're becoming fewer and fewer because who wouldn't choose emancipation from slavery if you could have it? So there's some who would prefer to be in that position, and they want to. And sometimes it's just because of religious beliefs, and they believe that that's the role in the family. So if when it comes to religion, maybe that's an exception. But otherwise, I think it is a good thing to have women as equal partners in a relationship. Okay, so then he goes on and says, that being said, I still have, I can understand how women want to be led by a strong man, but at the same time, I don't want a baby that's passive and takes no responsibility. I agree. Who would want that? Unless you're a weak man and you never want to be challenged. So there are those people. And I don't think she'd want that either, especially on the long term. So on one hand, I'm supposed to lead, dominate, impose my will, and hold her accountable. Oh, God. No, you took the wrong lesson. But I get it, because a lot of the manosphere, I don't know, like men's development world, they're very simple-minded. It's very bro-science. They haven't done any real research. All the psychology they know is social psych and evolutionary psych, which is all manipulative, Machiavellian, red and tooth and claw stuff with no good and evil or in it. So no morality in it. There's no goodness in it. There's no truth or justice or love in it. There's no room for love there. There's only room for power. So I get it, but that's the wrong approach. So then he goes on. But on the other hand, I'm supposed to respect her need for independence, autonomy, and self-reliance, and I'm expected to magically know when to do what and to what extent. I still have a lot of work ahead. So Colin has responded, it's not an imbalance of power at all, and it's nothing to do with dominating. It's about setting boundaries and having them respected. He told her his boundaries, and she chose to respect what he said or risk losing him. So that's better. Okay, so it is important to be able to communicate your boundaries, and that's an interesting point to note. Let me see if there's anything else he's replied a bunch of times here. And so Hartmut also replied, women expect the man to lead and be dominant. If you want genuine respect, that's the only way forward. Forget about the mainstream media, feminist teachings, it's toxic. I can understand why he's saying that again, right? So they're taking the wrong lesson though. They're completely missing the point of why she would actually listen to what he said. Instead of him, they're just looking at it as he laid down the law. And it scares me because I wonder how many of them have listened to any of the things that I have said in any of my Man Up videos or in any of the free courses, because I clearly, if you understand the principles of what I've been teaching, you would not take this view that the position of the man is to just lay down the law and be dominant and be a tyrant, right? And so anyway, Anthony Paul Johnson says this chick is a basket case. And so and that goes down that road. And then there's this other one. Sumro said, he did manage to curb her drama, but isn't it better and more mature choice to go for better quality women right off the bat? And he makes a choice there. I mean, a good point there. And So let's get to it. What is the lesson to take away from this? Well, first of all, it is being human. Okay, so this is the progression of this transformation, or like the lesson that she learned from the husband was that that's not the right way to succeed in a relationship. This particular behavior, no one actually looked at the behavior that was there. They just looked at the enforcement of power, right, which says a lot about where people's minds are, instead of paying attention to the deeper things. And what she had to learn was emotional regulation. And is it a good thing to be able to emotionally regulate? After all, that's one of the great benefits of meditation. Well, fuck yeah. I would hope that you can regulate your emotions. I hope you're self-aware enough to realize you're being triggered and you're set off and you're out of control and you're about to do something very childish, and you can refrain from doing that, even though it's really hard because that's your pattern for so long of slamming doors. And knowing that when he pointed that out, she didn't say, no, intellectually, that's a bad idea. What did she do? She said, that's a good idea. That makes sense. That made a lot of sense, because anybody who's intelligent would see, or wise, I should say, would see that does make sense. You want to not just slam the doors and walk off. And none of the commenters really mention that. They're more like, did he lay down the law, and was he was he dominant, and that's why she was turned on? And I'm not sure if that's just because of the group of people we have. But so then we can see that she's matured, because the real difference is between maturity and immaturity. How do you go from having a mature reaction to an immature reaction to becoming a mature person with a mature reaction? It's difficult. And the first step is to be self-aware enough to know that you're going into an immature pattern. But it's not like you just change like that, because if it was that easy, you would have done it already. No, it's not. It's difficult because you're getting triggered. Very likely in Kristen Bell's, is it Kirsten or Kristen? I'm not even sure her name. Kristen Bell's. In Bell's childhood, very likely that was her reaction to disagreement in the family. Maybe she probably slammed the door of her bedroom and then slammed the door of her closet and then stewed in her closet. And then eventually dad would then the family just wouldn't deal with it, and they swept the thing under the rug. And then they move on with their lives. And that's how she was used to dealing with arguments. But that's not going to work anymore as an adult. But she's so used to doing that when the going gets tough, she reverts back to her childhood patterns. So it's very understandable. Now, how do you stop this from happening? By the way, this is also why you have approach anxiety. This is also why you go blank when you see a hot girl. This is, again, for the guys from the pickup world, that I know I have a lot of following there. So making this more relevant to them, but I'm bringing it back to the podcast now, which is that it's a maturity issue, not a masculine-feminine issue. Let's flip it around. Let's say the guy gets mad, because if you think it's masculine to lay down the law and it's feminine for drama to happen, like Anthony Paul Johnson says she's a basket case, there's all these guys saying it's drama. This isn't drama. This is human beings being human beings. This is human beings being immature. And here's the male version of what she did. Hulk, right? So he gets so angry, he throws something. Or actually, many men leave, right? They can't stand it. It's often the other way around. A woman wants to talk because women generally are more verbal anyway. And the man wants to not talk because he can't deal with the fight. So what does he do? He slams the door, slams the car door or whatever, gets into the car, drives, and he usually would just drive. I know I have male friends who drive for 30 minutes just to cool down. I wouldn't drive in anger, but okay, whatever. I can see how that's just soothing in a way, and it calms them down. Then they come back, and they would prefer not to talk about it. But sometimes they've calmed down enough they can talk about it. But if she says the wrong thing again, or the thing that triggers him off again, he's out again. So whether it's a man or a woman who's taken off, the lesson's the same. It's don't take off in the heat of the argument. Stay as much as you can, or just give a bounded time. Like, I'm going to take off for 5 minutes. I'll be right back. Give me some space. And you go cool off and come back. Not just an unbounded time, because that's always going to be triggering all of our childhood abandonment issues. Because if you learn anything from attachment styles science, you know that a secure attachment style can only come from knowing that the mom won't go away. But if the mom slams the door on the baby and takes off, the baby now thinks that's over, I'm dead. Then, well, that's the fear. That's why there's all that neediness happening around the world. So it's so there's security and anxiousness, and it's not a masculine feminine thing. It's a maturity immaturity thing. So it's not a man or woman thing. It's a maturity immaturity thing. What is it? It's a maturity immaturity thing, and it shows a lot about people's maturity when they don't notice that, when they think it's a man versus woman masculine versus feminine power struggle. So I just wanted to point out, what does it look like when someone starts off immature with an immature reaction from childhood, which is normal and that we all have, to be easily triggered in special situations that remind us of perceived trauma from our childhood? We look like that, like what Kristen did. And the male version of that is anger. So don't think that, they can go into a rage. They can get quite physical and violent. At least she just walked off and sat in the car, right? Dudes, I know dudes who can become much more dangerous when they have that feeling in them. And that's masculine. That's a masculine reaction. Hers might be, more feminine one might be screaming at him, right? So like we all have different types of reflexes from our childhood and our coping strategies. She chose to leave, to move away. But many of us move towards, and we beg and we plead and we cry and that sort of thing. That's drama too, but that's not, I guess everything is drama, the human drama. It's just immaturity. And you need to be patient and work through from immaturity to maturity. And it takes a more mature person to help you do that. So in this case, in this instance, in this situation, her husband was more mature than she was, and he wasn't getting triggered and was more in his executive true self to be able to point out to her what's happening so that she can have the room to grow. Now, again, flip it around. What if it's a man and the woman says, no, you can't leave this house when we have a fight? Is that bad because she's laying down the law? I fucking hope not. I fucking hope you're not a Neanderthal bro science guy who thinks it's all just about men dominating and that's what turns women on. So I hope you're smart enough that you listen to leadership from wherever it comes. And if she's saying the truth, whether it's the man or the woman saying the truth, I hope that we're in fucking the 21st century and we're not having to move the clock back to the 19th century. But I know that there are a lot of men in America who are trying to do that. So please, if that's you, I don't want you in the group. All right, there are a million groups for you, and in fact, you guys run the country right now of America. So power to you. But hopefully, you see that there's another way to look at this, and maybe you having a Gestalt insight moment when you're seeing like, okay, it's not a masculine feminine fight. It's a maturity immaturity fight, and this is an example of how you can lead your partner, whether you're the man or the woman, into a more mature reaction to your arguments, and that will always happen. So if you can't have moments like this in your marriage or in your relationship will fail. Guaranteed. And how do I know all these guys with these bitter comments are going to have failed relationships and never experience real love for any length of time? Because they have these reactions, because they think it's a power struggle. They don't see that it's a maturity issue and it's about growth and healing and moving forward and helping the other person out of love to, as they're going into their rage, because of their childhood issues or because of their childhood patterns, to have the patience to lead them through to maturity. And this is also what your therapist will do. When you're in your therapist's room, he needs to see these things. You tell him of these things, and he needs to see you emote. And we talked about emoting as quickly as you can to make the maximum use of the time there. And being self-aware enough to know that you're feeling this, whether it's Hulk anger, because by the way, like the masculine, again, I just want to really hammer this home. The masculine thing to do here would have been to Hulk anger that shit, right? Like there's an enlightened masculine, which is the detached leader who, without emotion, is able to say these other things. But there's mature masculine and there's immature masculine. There's mature feminine and there's immature feminine, right? So what's the real factor that's changing here? Not masculine and feminine, because there's both mature masculine, and mature feminine. And immature masculine, immature feminine. It's the immature and the mature. Immaturity and maturity. And you can have different terms for this. So if you're a different type of psychologist, you might call this integrated and disintegrated. So if you're familiar with parts therapy or internal family systems therapy, that's a great way to think about it. That she had not yet integrated that wounded child in her that would act out in that way. So the right way to integrate that is to heal that child that's acting so rageful. And because that's really a childish reaction. That's not if a real woman wanted to do if an adult wanted to do some serious damage, they do a lot more than that. That clearly, of the slamming of the doors, is just a child in there who's wounded and got triggered again and got reminded of the thing that happened in her childhood. So the right thing to do is to be mature and give the space and the patience and the time for this person to work through this and move closer towards the mature reaction. It's not a masculine feminine issue. right? Because you could have flipped it, and that woman, like Scarlett Johansson in the Hulk, yeah, right? She's like, the light's getting real low, or the sun's getting real low, and she's trying to calm him. That's what the fuck happened here. But it's flipped, right? The dude was like, calm down. You can't leave. You got to calm down. You got to change from the Hulk back into a human being. We flip it around. So she actually did the masculine thing. She got fucking mad and got the fuck out of there, right? So if you're a bro science Joe bro guy, and the fuck you do. No, it's not a masculine feminine thing. The Hulk and Scarlett Johansson would have been the same roles, right? But it's just reversed. So it is a feminine thing to be a healer and to be detached and to lead your child through the pain and the anger. So it's not a masculine feminine thing. It's a maturity immaturity thing. So I probably haven't that thing home. I realize I have to really emphasize and repeat points for it to get into people's minds. I'm so disappointed in myself that my message and my principles of relationships weren't clear enough that the guys in the comments would misinterpret this 2-minute clip. So I wanted to clarify that. Thank you so much, guys, for the comments and for inspiring this episode. And by the way, this is the DTPHD Podcast. I'm speaking into this particular mic here. And if you haven't subscribed to the DTPHD Podcast, you can do that. We got different versions on all the different platforms, so you can find it. You can also find it on davidtianphd.com/DTPHD Podcast. And then if you're on Man Up, I'm not sure which episode this is. This is going to go up pretty soon. So subscribe to this because this is brand new. We got, actually, at the moment of this recording, we only have one episode up, but we'll be putting them up every week. And we're also experimenting with a vlog. So I got these babies in, and these are awesome. I wish I could make money off of promoting AirPods. I love these so far. So unfortunately, these are not mine. These are my camera woman's. So, all right. So we're going to end the episode here. And thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. And it's David Tian signing out until I see you again. Man up. And I'll see you in the next podcast. Hey, it's David again. Before you go, a couple last things. First, all the show notes and links to resources can be found at davidtianphd.com/DTPHD Podcast. Or you can just go to davidtianphd.com and find it through the top navigation menu. Second, if you'd like to interact with me or other like-minded fans of the podcast, then join our private DTPHD Podcast Facebook group. We've got an awesome community of intelligent, wise individuals from literally all around the world. You can send a join request to the group using the link you'll find in the show notes of every podcast at davidtianphd.com/DTPHD Podcast. Click the link, log into your Facebook, and then click to join. We approve join requests every day. So go to davidtianphd.com and click the link to join. See you inside our group.